haven't been doing garlands because of pandemic. Radanga. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Kunjabi Adi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Gopi Jana Balabha Girivadhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivadhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivadhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamuna Kiravana Chadi Jamuna Kiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Balabha Girivadhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivadhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivadhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivadhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamuna Kiravana Chadi Jamuna Kiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatara Sattasi Srimad His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. These days everyone has a mobile phone, or two, or three. And with your mobile phone you can look up the verse. Except our children, you don't have a mobile phone. But mom and dad do, and they can help you. 11:237. 11:230. Oh, it's up here. Oh gosh, look at that. Okay. Ayam tutiyam abhiniveshitak syad. Ishadi petasya viparyayos smritihi. Tanmaya yato buddha abhajitam. Vaidyaika keshyam guru devatatma. Vayam dutiya biniveshitak syat. Ishada petasya viparyayos smritihi. Tanmaya yato buddha abhajitam. Bhaktiyaika yesham guru devatatma. Ayam dutiya biniveshitak syat. Ishad epetasya viparyayos smritihi. Tanmaya yato buddha abhajitam. Vaidyaika yesham guru devatatma. Vayam dutiya biniveshitak syat. Petasya viparyayos smritihi. Tanmaya yato buddha abhajitam. Vaidyaika yesham guru devatatma. Vayam tritiya biniveshitak syat. Ishad apetasya viparyayos smritihi. Tanmaya yato buddha abhajitam. Vaidyaika yesham guru devatatma. Jivanasati. It's too blurry. Let's bring you a little, not blurry, but device there. Vayam dvitiya biniveshitak syad. Ishad epetasya viparyayos smritihi. Maya yato buddha abhajitam. Vaidyaika yesham guru devatatma. Krishna Priya. Vayam dvitiya biniveshitak syat. Ishada petasya viparyayos smritihi. Buddha abhajitam. Vaidyaika yesham guru devatatma. Vayam dvitiya viniveshatak syad. Ishad apetasya viparyayo smritihi. Dhamaya yato buddha avajetam. Madan Mohan, do you want to try? Bhayam, fear. Dvitiya, in something seeming to be other than the Lord. Abhiniveshataha, because of absorption. Syat, it will arise. Ishat, from the Supreme Lord. Apetasya, for one who has turned away. Viparyaha, misidentification. Asmritihi, forgetfulness. Tat, of the Lord. Mayaya, by the illusory energy. Ataha, therefore. Bodhaha, an intelligent person. Abhajet, should worship fully. Tam, him. Bhaktya, with devotion. Ekaya, unalloyed. Isham, the Lord. Guru Devata Atma, one who sees his own spiritual master as his Lord and very soul. Translation: fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. Thus, this bewildering, fearful condition is effected by the potency for illusion called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinching in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and his very life and soul. Purport. According to Srimad Swami, the objection may be raised that since fear is caused by ignorance, it can be dispelled by knowledge, and there is no need to worship the Supreme Lord. The living entity falsely identifies with his material body, society, and so on, and he simply has to give this false identification. Then what will Maya be able to do? In reply to this argument, Srila Sridhar Swami has quoted the following verse from Bhagavad Gita. Daiviyeshu gunamayi mama maya daratya mama viya prapadyante maya metam tarantite. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. The living entity called Jiva Tattva is one of the potencies of the Supreme Lord, but the constitutional position of the living entity is Tata Sta, or marginal. Being minute, and every living entity is eternally dependent on the Supreme Living Entity, Krishna. This is confirmed in the Vedic literature as follows: Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Ekabahunam Yodavidadati Kaman. Among all the eternally conscious beings, there's one supreme eternal living being who is the deeds of all the innumerable others. Katha Upanishad. Krishnadas Kaviraj has stated, Ekale Ishvara Krishna Ara Sababritya. Krishna is the only independent controller. All other living entities depend upon him. Just as the finger is part and parcel of the body and therefore must always be engaged in bodily service, we as parts and parcels of Krishna, Mame Vangsa Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, have the eternal duty, Sanatan Dharma, of engaging in the unalloyed service of the Lord. This is a long purport. We're not going to read the whole thing. It's too long. The potency of the Lord that enlightens us in the Lord's service is called Chit Shakti. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments that when the living entity develops a spirit of independence, he is forced to come to the material world, where he enters into various types of petty and undesirable behavior that create a fearful situation for him. The Bahiranga Shakti, the illusory potency of the Supreme Lord, covers all trace of the Chit Shakti and imposes one material body after another upon the living entity for its gross, sinful enjoyment. As further punishment, the living entity has given up his loving relationship with Krishna, loses all power to perceive the eternal blissful form of the Supreme Lord, who is his actual shelter. Instead, the living entity becomes attached to many temporary phantasmagorical forms, such as his personal bodies, the bodies of his family members and friends, his nation, his city, with its buildings and cars and innumerable types of ephemeral material scenery. In such a state of gross ignorance, the idea of returning to one's original identity no longer even crosses the mind. One more paragraph. By the laws of God, the three modes of material nature are constantly in conflict, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita. This conflict is described in many places in the Bhagavatam as guna vyati karam. When the living entity is bewildered by the interactions of the modes of material nature, he comes to the conclusion of relativity and assumes that God and worship of God are simply byproducts of the relative, contradictory interactions of nature's modes. In the name of anthropological, sociological, or psychological perspective, the living entity falls deeper and deeper into the darkness of material ignorance, dedicating himself to mundane piety, economic development, sense gratification, or speculation, which he regards the absolute as lacking variety and personality, which he assumes to be products of the interaction of nature's modes, and so forth. Another 2 pages and so forth. This has got Sri Dayananda Maharaj's fingerprints all over it. Something that Dravida told me is he was the editor, Dravida was the editor for this, the conclusion of the Bhagavatam, the parts that Prabhupada didn't translate and comment upon. And most of the work, according to Dravida, was Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu. And he did the work, Hridayananda Maharaj looked over the work, did whatever he did, and then it was published. But there are some parts that are clearly Hridayananda Maharaj's language, his choice of words, his way of speaking strongly and things like that. This is clearly one of his. That's my opinion. I could ask him, but it's pretty clear. And his purports are generally much longer. Like, okay, keeps going. Very, very strong writer and speaker. And the section that we just read is a philosophical section describing the force of Maya, or illusory energy, that covers the living entity and all the other things it does. Forgetfulness of who we are, forgetfulness of one's relationship with the Supreme, which is right in the verse. Ishadapetasya viparyayo smritihi. Those are byproducts of something. And the something is absorption in dvitiya, or the bodily conception of life, or duality. So I in the course of answering the how-to questions that people ask all the time, how to this and that, and this is an important one, because many of the personal struggles of people have to do with duality, and a big one is fear, because when one is absorbed in the bodily conception, fear arises. I mean, there may be other emotions, but fear arises. And fear can have, different flavors. A big one currently is, pandemic related, is uncertainty. Who knows? I mean, never do we know. Do we know? We don't know. But it amplifies uncertainty, like what's around the corner, and what's next, and the variants, and what do you do, and different people say different things about what you do, what you shouldn't do. But so there's a lot of uncertainty. Not only pandemic related, but everything. The economy, job security, and on and on and on. And on and on and on. So it grips people. The uncertainty brings fear, because you don't know. Then there's people that don't know, and they just don't know that they don't know. Or they're bullies. They don't know, but they pretend like they know. I had a very memorable exchange once upon a time. I was riding in a subway with Rupanuga Prabhu. You know Rupanuga Prabhu. We were doing some service together, and we were riding in the subway in New York. And he looked around the subway car, leaned over, and said, "Everyone is in fear." And then he explained, they don't know. They don't know if they're going to get to their destination. They don't. There's uncertainty. Where there's uncertainty, there's always fear. And then people bluff. The decal, no fear, the macho, or the ignorant, etc., etc. But they don't know. And it's something people just become accustomed to and live with. But is there a position of fearlessness? Because who knows? We're not in the position of becoming knowers, like omniscient. That's not a possibility. We can know the knowable, but we can't know the unknowable. So the fear arises, that's the first line. Bhayam, and then syat, fear arises, due to abhinivesh, absorption in dutiyam. And the translators have chosen to give the word for word, in something seeming to be other than the Lord. Now this is the non-different feature. This is the way it's chosen. There's different ways of choosing. But everything, there's a source of everything. And since there's a source of everything, there's a non-different relationship between everything and its source. So seeing things separate from the source is dutiya, it's duality. Then comes this whole, monist idea, it's all one. And so that's their solution to fear, is it's all one. Just a homogenized existence. Turn life into a blender, turn it on high speed, leave it running for some time, it becomes, everything is one. And then this emotion called fear is when you turn the blender off and everything separates out again and you see things separate. Now their idea, it's touched upon in this and it goes further in the other 2 pages. The impersonal solution is just knowledge is the antidote for ignorance. Ignorance covers, just get knowledge. When you got knowledge, you understand it's all one, and there's no more fear. Kind of neat and tidy solution. So just cultivate knowledge. But that's not a solution. Why is it not a solution? If ignorance covering the living entity is the cause of fear and all other feelings, perceptions of duality, why isn't it sufficient? Because the nature of this world is forgetfulness of the source. The source is not just a place of oneness. It's a fact. The source is a person. Then, so, ishadape tasya viparyayo smritihi. So along with that, absorption in the bodily conception, customarily this dutiyam is, as it's presented in the verse, he identifies himself as the material body. Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body. I mean, probably all of us in different features of our service, we're called upon to help people that are feeling some negative emotion. We should know whatever negative emotion arises in us, besides the transcendental ones that are ecstatic, but it's the material ones, it's absorption in the bodily conception. That's the root. On the ride over here, I just saw a text message. Janani Vas is in a hospital in Calcutta with a diagnosis of cancer. And it seems treatable, but he's a very dear Vaishnav. So what do you do if you're not the body? Do we just, he's not the body, he's an eternal soul. Anyway, managing feelings is a big part of life. and how to manage feelings when there's the positive ones, the negative ones, and we're supposed to be neutral. So it's not, neutral doesn't mean numb. Neutral means you see transcendence. You see the relationship of all things to the source of all things. It gets a little complicated, doesn't it? Like, how do you balance transcendence and numbness? We want loving feelings towards Jananivas and loving devotees. And yet at the same time we know the clock is ticking and every one of us isn't going to be around after some time. And then what? There's going to be a negative feeling. Or whatever. Any of these uncertainty things, and it turns out not nice instead of so the solution on going further in the verse, because we only read a certain number of paragraphs and there's 2 more pages, there is a solution to fear and other similar negative emotions, and forgetfulness of who we are, and forgetfulness of our relationship with the Supreme, and absorbed in the bodily conception. That's the bad news. That's the Maya news. Then there's the good news. Bhaktya ekaya. Bhaktya ekaya, with unalloyed devotion, eka bhakta, that arises from hearing from those who are beyond duality, or hearing from those who are repeating Krishna's message, which is beyond duality. We can absorb ourselves in that reality, spiritual reality. Then the negative emotion management program becomes manageable, because there's a place of shelter. And the place of shelter is provided to us through sound. And through sound we can have access to that shelter. And with the sound is the form and qualities and activities of the personality of Godhead. Our primary sound is the Mahamantra, and then, scriptures. Our primary scriptures are Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And then the acharyas who repeat that sound and expand upon that sound and illuminate that sound and add other features of light and form and transcendental emotion connected with that sound. And so their association gives us better access to that sound, that primordial sound. Because the name is eternal, and within the name is everything. The pastimes, etc., etc. The scriptures, they're as eternal as the name is, as is the Lord, who's the source of everything. So everything is resting upon that. If we can make our connection with that which everything is resting upon, we're in a better position to manage our emotions, while still feeling human feelings for people who are going through difficult times. We all know people going through difficult times. We probably have some of our most pressing ones that as I'm sitting here thinking about it, it's the most pressing ones. And then there's a whole world of people going through hurt and difficulty and struggle. And what do? You can numb yourself, or you can care, and then what do you do? when you care. Practically speaking, the greatest gift that can be given to someone who's struggling is, while simultaneously expressing concern for their struggle, simultaneously help them come to the position of shelter and transcendence. And that's this Deva Atma. Deva Atma, the one who reminds one, it's a spiritual master function, or it's a friend function, a spiritual friend function. Although it may not be the formality of a Shiksha Guru friend, but a friend is, the friend is one who reminds one of transcendence, or reminds one of what one has forgotten, or reminds one of Krishna. That's a friend. And in that remembrance of Krishna is, let us serve Krishna. Let us not forget our service to Krishna. While simultaneously expressing some concern over the duality feature that looks scary and is causing fear, or whatever, doing something that's practical to help the person, like they're doing in Mayapur for Janadivas. I'm sure they're doing yagyas, and I'm sure they're offering prayers, and I'm sure they're making sure it's the best medical care and so forth, because he's a great personality, an exceptional personality. He's an important personality. So you do things on the practical plane, and you extend your well wishes, etc., etc. At the same time, everything is in Krishna's hands. And at some point, Janadivas is not going to be with us, and at some point, every one of us is not going to be with us. And that's just a reality, and it's sad, but it's a reality. And so what do? Attach yourself to Sat. And invest time and energy in Sat, or Sat Sangha, or Sadhu Sangha, in a quality way. Absorption in the process of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, etc., in the association of devotees. And encourage others to do the same. Be good in behavior, in character, and in conduct. That's encouraging people to participate together in a meaningful, congenial way. Well, we help one another with the difficulties that arise from duality. We don't just give it a bad name and turn it off. We acknowledge with a reasonable effort, make some reasonable effort to deal with situations, and primarily renew our remembrance of the Supreme Lord, because all of this arises, the whole cycle of repeated birth and death arises from turning our attention away. It's directly in the part that we read. Now, it doesn't address the question, why? That's a favorite question. The fall of the jiva. Not what, but why. And leaving the wide question to the side, what? The antidote for the what is not just knowledge, but restoring that relationship that we turned away from and have thus forgotten, and thus struggling with duality, and thus having duality experiences that have negative emotions connected to them. And some positive emotions, but negative emotions we don't like. We don't like others to have to go through negative emotions. There was somebody that was asking a nice question, like 3 times, that really wanted to understand. How do I deal with my emotions when I'm going through something, and I know there are those that are close to me that know I'm going through something, and they're feeling negative emotions about the something that I'm going through? It's one thing to manage your own negative emotions about something you're going through or someone else is going through. But how do you deal with that one? It's the same principle. It's this verse. It's in Canto 7, Chapter 1, there's this nice discussion given by Maharaj Yudhisthira right after the deliverance of Shishupal at the Rajasuya Yagya, and he merges with the body of Krishna, and he wants to know, Yudhisthira wants to know from Narada how that happened. He was so bad, so inimical. And the answer, short answer, his mind was absorbed in Krishna. And therefore he got liberation. And then a very curious statement is made by Narada, that when there's fear, the mind becomes even more concentrated than when there's not fear. In his case, it wasn't with fear of Krishna, it was hate, he hated him. He had very, very negative, so strong. So our devotional life is the positive mood, and in holding a positive mood in relation to Krishna when you're dealing with duality that has its negative emotion aspects, like Jananivas, because it just came, or anything else. That's someone that's close to you, or someone, a family member, or something. The negative is, without being grounded in this mood of our eternal position as the servant of Krishna, meant for his pleasure, and living our lives accordingly from the core of our heart, then we're going to be tossed around by the waves of the illusory energy. Even, you're a nice person, good devotee, etc., etc. This human form of life is an opportunity, repeating Prabhupada's teaching all the time, is to achieve perfection, or to make a solution to the problems. The human form of life is meant for that. And it's easy. It's easy to say, one last thing. It's easy to say, just ABC, and you go back to Godhead. There's a nice man that I spent some time with about a week ago. In his 50s, grew up not a Hare Krishna devotee, has grown-up children. He's 50 plus years of age, and very thoughtful man, reading Bhagavad Gita for the past several months. And his whole life was, a Christian upbringing, and so he's now part of a Bhagavad Gita study group, and he was having, I've had this debate with the other persons. They feel this one lifetime back to Godhead, and I feel it may take it's going to be a gradual process. So who wins that debate? He wanted me the judge, or something like that. And one who has faith, and Prabhupada said it many times, that in this one lifetime. And to say, well, in this one lifetime, that's it. Just ABC and back to Godhead. Is it that simple? Is it that simple? I had a discussion on this topic with Janmastami Prabhu. Central March disciple, book distributor, Janmastami Prabhu. And he had the faith that just do book distribution, you're going back to Godhead. And here's this reference, that reference. Prabhupada said it. That's it. Just do book distribution, going back to Godhead. And I said, it's supposing you're doing book distribution, your mind's in the gutter. Or whatever. So, gradual process and swift process. The swift deliverance from the cycle of birth and death is a potential. That was my discussion with this elderly man, or mature man. It's certainly possible. His view is it's going to however long it takes. I've got a lot of stuff to clean up. However long it takes, I'm committed. And my colleagues over there are saying, no, just this one lifetime. I mean, it's not like they're taking it cheaply, but it's quite possible. That's their faith. So when you have faith, then your actions have to be commensurate with your faith. Consistently. So that's just, back to the Sanskrit of the verse. Oops, I lost the page. Here we go. Bhaktya ekaya isham guru devata atma. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and his very life and soul. To get out of Maya, to get out of the repetition of birth and death, to make a solution to these problems. Permanent. See if there's some discussion. Yes?
So we have been...
Do we have a portable microphone or no? Yes, go ahead.
So we hear this often, that we are not Anartha conscious, but we are Krishna conscious. So I've been this stays with me for so many years, and I've been contemplating about this, where most of us are in the phase of anartha nivritti, where we see tangibly, right in front of us, all the anarthas, including fear. And in my observation, I see devotees fall under a spectrum where on the one side we see devotees totally overwhelmed with these negative emotions that's coming to them. On the other end of the spectrum, we see devotees being aware of them, but their attachment to Guru and Krishna is strong, and then they keep going. And I also observe that the awareness comes in phases. The awareness of our bodily attachment and bodily conception of life, it comes in phases, at least for me. What I mean is there are times when I know, right in front of my eyes, I know that I'm attached, but there are times when I'm oblivious about it, and then I go on with the daily life. So my question is, going back to the original instruction of we are not Anartha conscious, but we are Krishna conscious. But at least for me, it helps me to be more aware and more conscious of my anarthas. to be Krishna conscious. So I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Um,
Yes. It helps. To know what the problems of life are, it helps to achieve the solution to the problems of life. Say it negatively. If I'm not aware of what the problems of life are, I can sail on and not make a solution to the problems of life. Even if I'm, doing good things, even good devotional service. Now, is it possible, like this discussion? Yes, it's possible. Krishna can just clean up. And I don't have to think about, the unclean or the anarthas. Krishna will just, he keeps things very clean. It's possible. Look at Bhutana. It's possible. But that's, the standard for us, the standard is we need reminders of what the problems of life are. It's there in Bhagavad Gita, etc., etc., etc. And so it's not just like impetus, but it's keeping our course correction straight, so we know what the perfection is and what the complication to achieving perfection is. Or obstacle in achieving perfection is. Like this Bhakti Siddhanta analogy of you have to lift the anchor while you're rowing. So we need to know what our attachments are and what the byproducts of those attachments are, so you can fly forward effectively. That's, from ours. Krishna can interfere and lift the anchor. And, we don't rely on that. That's certainly possible. So that's one way of, a more simple way of saying is you have the cart before the horse. You know what's in the cart, but you put the horse before the cart because you want to get to a destination. You know what's in the cart, and you want to, streamline the process of getting to your destination. More?
Can I ask a follow-up on
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
So in the affective world, we tell them, let's say I observe somebody facing a fearful situation, we tell them, observe the fear because it's telling you an information.
Yes.
So, to me it looks like this verse is also indicating that.
Yes.
Because if as a devotee, as a practicing Krishna conscious devotee, if I see a fear in front of me, it's part of my Krishna conscious journey to look at it and inquire further, where is that coming from?
Yes. Yes.
So there is okay.
Now, then when you see where it's coming from, there's two parts. One part is this is the attachment that's the source of that fear. So I need to move towards transcendence to become free from that fear. But at the same time, depending upon, one's spiritual trajectory, one may need to do something about that which is prompting the fear. Even for a transcendentalist. Because you're a mother, your one of your children is doing something that's, their life is at risk. You do something quickly, effectively. So you deal with the circumstance, but you move to transcendence. But make sure, check yourself that moving towards transcendence is moving towards transcendence, and it's not something else. It's not a mix or a smoke screen or something. It's moving towards transcendence. Yeah.
So, I really like the analogy that you shared of the horse and the cart.
Yeah.
Because when we were driving to the temple this morning, right in front of us, there was a pickup truck, with, he had, in his cart, he had the leads, and he didn't secure them properly. So the bag of leads fell, and on our car hit the tire and put us in danger for a moment. So I really like this analogy because so each one of us, we come with a lot of baggage when we enter the association of devotees.
Yeah.
And if we don't know what's in our car, even if you're driving the horse and you're going to your destination, or you're thinking you're going to your destination, it seems to me that you can create a lot of damage by entering into any kind of association, small or big. And if there is more than one individual with such baggage and not full awareness, it just creates a lot of chaos. So I know it's not a cookie cutter recipe on how to deal with that problem, but it almost appears that it's better to instruct someone, or guide someone, please take care of your baggage offline before you come into an association of devotees. But that carries risk as well, because then you're not associating with devotees. So I see pros and cons for both approaches. Could you please guide?
Well, there are different approaches, isn't it? And if you consider hold up the model that you just spoke to what Bhaktisiddhanta and what Srila Prabhupada, two recent acharyas in disciplic succession did, they didn't follow the model that you just suggested. And but they're great personalities. They have a spiritual power to make people clean quick. But even when Prabhupada brought people that weren't clean quick, or became temporarily clean and then started reverting back to other, he was there to, keep things intact, keep the ship moving forward. There's lots of models like the one that you suggested going on these days. And it's part of it, my social comment is it's several things. It's, making the net that's spread reach a larger audience of people who aren't ready to jump with both feet into the pool. It's helping prepare people to come into the association of devotees for their own mindset and for their own sensibilities, and in modern times, etc., etc., etc. So there's some models like that I'm aware of. Probably lots I'm not aware of. And then another comment in response to the model that you suggested is our teachers, leaders, elders, experienced devotee personalities, while encouraging people to come forward, need to be simultaneously encouraging and offer proper training to be exemplary. I was just hearing Srila Prabhupada speaking, recorded lectures from Canto 6, Chapter 1, the Jamila story, about the necessity of devotees having proper conduct and character. Very, very strong. And the context was the Vishnu Dutas asking the Yamadutas, or the Yamadutas asking the Vishnu Dutas, who are you? Who's ever defied death? Our boss is Yamaraj. And who are you? And then the Vishnu Dutas said, we'll tell you who you are, but who we are. But first, what's Dharma? Because if you don't know what Dharma is and you're representing Dharmaraj, you need to go back to school, do your homework. And Prabhupada was saying like that. We're acting as devotees, and our conduct should be consistent with, the teachings of devotion. And it's very strong, very strong. Okay. Let's see if there's others. There's something online.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do our online.
Prabhu is asking a question.
I'm sure he is. He was probably, raising his hand before I finished.
So it goes like, how do we balance Krishna's clear instruction in the Bhagavad Gita 2.30 that one should not grieve for anyone with the clear statement in the end? In the end of the Srimad Bhagavatam 7th chapter, Canto 1, the sons of Pandu and Draupadi were overwhelmed with grief when they were performing the rituals for the dead bodies of their relatives. And the above question is under the heading of managing our feelings.
I couldn't follow. Could you follow?
I think he's saying you shouldn't have grief. You shouldn't grieve in the Bhagavad Gita. But then the devotees were grieving. So, is
Okay.
that what it is?
Yes, thank you.
And we have ceremonies. Bhakti Chumaraj and his departure. I mean, there was a lot of grieving going on all over the place. It's natural. Then there's other references where, on the departure of one's spiritual master, for example, or it means someone that you're very dedicated to and attached to, like that, one should cry. It's like an injunction and prohibition side by side. So there's an appropriate, there's not a clear black and white answer to this. It's natural. A transcendental emotion is natural, and a bodily emotion is also natural because we have bodies and we identify in terms of the body. And then, then it becomes gray. That is, there's a loss of the physical presence of someone, And to what extent, the answer is it's gray. It's just to some extent it's a spiritual and some extent it's a material. So one should not go to the material side, but the spiritual side is to be encouraged. In fact, natural. And if one is feeling, if a devotee, the Pandavas or anyone is feeling some negative emotion, comfort that person and remind the person of transcendence. One more. And then we're going to end because of time. There are already some people left. Oh, you have something? Okay. Go ahead. Online.
This is from Manish Prabhu. I'm repeating his question. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam and your lotus feet. Thank you so much for selecting this verse and wonderful class. As I understand, the message is to move away from the material energy or duality. Our focus should be to absorb in the service of Guru and Krishna. But what if one cannot move away from the activities causing fear because we have to fulfill our worldly responsibilities? How to handle such a situation? Your servant, Manish.
It's simple. It's in words it's simple, but perform duty without attachment. So you do the duty without attachment. You don't have to move away from the activity, you move away from the attachment. You do the activity as a duty that's offered to Krishna, and whatever the result is, that's up to Krishna. Karma yoga, detached karma pala tyag. Go ahead.
This is in the translation from Sanskrit to English. I think it's the last thing.
In the translation or the word for word?
Word for word, sorry. It says something about you have to see your spiritual master.
One who sees his own spiritual master as his Lord and very soul.
That's the Lord and what?
And very soul.
Worshipable deity and very life and soul. Or, in the word for word, his Lord and very soul.
And very soul, I can understand that.
Well, it's Sri Dayananda Maharaj, first of all. And my life is not separate from. My life is not separate from Prabhupada. I can't separate my life from Prabhupada. Okay, thank you very much, Prabhupada Ki Jai.